This video is brought to you by Zenny Optical. Where do I rank the 9 Spider-Man movies from least to best? Also known as, Hey Laron, give the internet yet another reason to absolutely hate you. Challenge accepted. I'm not gonna lie, readers, I've been wanting to make this video for about a month. And you may be asking yourself, why would I want to do such a thing, knowing that there's a significant portion of the Spider-Man fanbase that always treats vids and lists like this as a personal attack if they're nowhere close to their own? Well, one, because to a certain extent, I enjoy organized mess. Especially organized mess that can give me significant watch time. And 2, making rank/tier lists like this allows me to think critically about what did and didn't work in a film for me. So much so that, depending on how many opinions I unearth regarding the subject of what did and didn't work, may end up being its own video down the line. Now, as you know, Spider-Man No Way Home, as of the recording of this video, is the latest Spidey film to be released and has only been in theaters for about 3 days. And the reason why I didn't make this video a month ago was because I wanted to see No Way Home first so that I could rank it accordingly. But now that I have No Way Home under my belt, after going into a crowded matinee showing of it while doing my best to channel my inner Bernie Sanders, here is my current ranking from least favorite to all-time favorite of every Spider-Man movie. Which means no, I'm not including either of the Venom movies. But if you know anything about me, you should already know that I was never going to include any of the Venom movies. But before I give the internet yet another reason to be toxic towards me, I want to talk to you about this video's sponsor, Zenny Optical. As you can see, I recently got a new pair of glasses, and I love them. I've been in need of a new pair for a while. My old frames were falling apart, my peripheral vision was cut off, my old prescription was obsolete, and I needed a blue light filter so that my eyes would stop hurting every time I tried to do my job. Thankfully, after getting a copy of my new prescription, I was able to find a modern and stylish take on my preferred rectangular frames on Zenny, with everything I mentioned previously for under $70, expedited shipping included, and I want to extend that experience over to you. So from now until January 4th, 2022, you can get 10% off of your new frames at Zenny if you use the code in my description. So if you have a copy of your prescription and you're in need of new glasses that are stylish and more affordable than the ones at your optometrist, including extra stuff like transition lenses, anti-reflection, and blocks, their blue light filter technology, then use the code and get the new lenses and frames that you've been putting off for years because you didn't think that you could afford the eye exam or the frames without insurance. Based on a true story, y'all. Offer expires on January 4th, 2022, and thanks to Zenny Optical for sponsoring this video. So, I'm not even going to waste some of y'all's time. My number 9 and my number 8 are the Amazing Spider-Man movies. 2 for number 9 and 1 for number 8. There are a few problems that I have with the ASM movies that turn me off from the overall concept the franchise was going in. And that's the chosen one narrative it tried to run with Peter, and the mystery behind the importance of his parents that they tried to adapt from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. I also never really gelled with Andrew Garfield's depiction of Peter Parker. Not his Spider-Man, his Peter Parker. I always thought that his Peter was a bit too cool to properly be Peter, which sucks because both his Spider-Man and Garfield's understanding of the character as a whole is absolutely perfect. Like, his interview regarding why he feels Peter shouldn't look up to Tony Stark during his press tour for TASM 2 was just perfect. Speaking of Ultimate Spider-Man, I actually didn't have a problem with the whole Oscorp was responsible for the genetically altered spider that bit Peter bit that the ASM movies adapted. But they failed to make the shadowy man in the hat character foreshadowing whatever grand Spidey event that they were planning for TASM actually compelling to me, or even get me to care about it enough to look forward to my questions being answered in the next installment. Especially considering how they decided to haphazardly wrap up that storyline with the subway lab scene in 2. I don't know, man, they were doing a lot with that, and I wasn't really feeling it. The reason why TASM 2 is number 9 instead of number 8, however, is that along with all of my previous points, they still felt the need to tackle on Norman Osborn's Green Goblin with an Electro-focused story just to establish and foreshadow events that are too in the future for us to properly care about when we already had the stuff from the first movie to deal with. My personal bias against Jamie Foxx aside, TASM 2 was too busy focusing on all of the side shit from part 1 that they wanted me to acknowledge was prominent info for me to properly care about Peter's want to help Max. Hell, all the foreshadowing and focus on the mystery and chosen one aspect from part 1 kept me from caring about the relationship between Peter and Harry in it as well. While there's stuff about them that I did appreciate, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they just didn't work for me. And at this point, it's gonna have to take some real bad solo Spider movies for them to move higher up on the list. Number 7, Spider-Man Far From Home. Far From Home was fun, and I really did like how Mysterio was utilized when his true villainistic nature was revealed. But this was also the movie that really showed me just how much of a crutch Iron Man was to the development of MCU Peter, and it makes me not really like it as much. And yes, that's both in regarding Peter's personal relationship with him, and Mysterio being the second MCU Spider movie to have beef with him as their main motivation to become a villain. And while it made sense for Vulture and his crew in Homecoming and provided a very powerful commentary on the working class constantly getting screwed over, seeing how the Mysterio thing played out the way that it did in Far From Home made me realize that blaming Tony Stark for the majority of Spidey's villains was not only the easy way out as far as motive and explanation, but also puts less agency on the interconnectivity as Spider-Man's actual nemesis. Not only should Tony Stark not be the main root for every Spidey villain depicted in the MCU, but he should also not be a replacement for Uncle Ben. Period. Number 6, Spider-Man 3. The reason why Spider-Man 3 is so high on the list is because Sam Raimi did his best with the bad situation he was given, and I will forever take this to my grave. Also, despite Avi Arad forcing Raimi to include Venom in the movie so he could make a paycheck on toy sales, Raimi was not only able to craft a very well done story on the toxicity of revenge and the importance of forgiveness, but actually find a way to link it back to the events of the first movie in order to make the only proper movie trilogy in the history of Spider-Man on the silver screen. Say what you want about Topher Grace's Eddie Brock. Say what you want about Peter Parker's symbiote dance and his fever performance at Mary Jane's bar. But considering what was forced upon him, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 could have been much worse. Number 5, Spider-Man No Way Home. So, I know that the movie just came out, so I'm not going to spoil it. Instead, I'll use this clip from the first Spider-Man movie to explain why I believe this film is as good as it turned out to be.
Back to formula.
Number 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. Despite the use of Tony Stark in the film, I really do enjoy how Spider-Man Homecoming truly feels like a quintessential Spider-Man story in the vein of a John Hughes film. I love how Vulture reflects that of a Raimi-era villain in the case of being given a very real motivation worthy of a Spider-Man story that boosts him from the C-tier character that he is in the comics to between that of an A and an S tier. And I love how they use one of the stories Ditko wrote for Spider-Man back when he was an Ayn Rand fanboy that tried to turn Peter into an objectivist incel as a result in order to do it. Want more info on that? My buddy Scott Nicewander over on NerdSync recently made a video about Steve Ditko's run as a writer on The Amazing Spider-Man that explains the overall philosophy and attitude that he tried to steer Peter in at the time that reflected his own viewpoints and philosophy. I highly recommend you check it out after this video. The point I'm trying to make is that I have a whole lot of love for Homecoming. Not necessarily for the things inspired by Miles Morales and applied to Peter's own upbringing, mind you. I'm still a bit salty about that. I appreciate Homecoming because of how much its narrative dips into and introduces Peter to his neutral good roots. Not only do we see through Vulture that this is how Peter learns to understand the importance of being a hero of the people, considering his motivations affected by who he looks up to, but this is also the beginning of him understanding that just because he works with a billionaire doesn't mean he should be beholden to him. And that's where I think Far From Home missed the mark with how they handled the relationship between Peter and Tony after Endgame. Definitely top 5 material for me. Number 3, Spider-Man 2002. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was able to mix the superhero origin world building and storytelling aspects that I grew to really appreciate in Richard Donner's Superman, with the action and deep dive associated with superheroes and the relationships with their arch nemesis that I grew up loving thanks to Tim Burton's Batman. Spider-Man 2002 is a quintessential superhero origin movie for me. And outside of the movies I mentioned earlier that I regularly compare this type of superhero storytelling style to, the only ones that have come relatively close to matching the hybrid of Superman and Batman that is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man within the MCU is Iron Man and Captain America. And that makes Spider-Man 2 my number 2. Not just because it did such a great job at showing the tragedy of Otto Octavius through the eyes of a filmmaker who really loves the character in order to do so, but also because it was the first time I've ever seen a specific arc/issue of a superhero comic book adapted on screen, regardless if it's a loose one or otherwise. Up until Spider-Man 2, every superhero sequel that I've seen were pretty much either original ideas or came from a comic issue that was either ridiculously old or I had no knowledge of. The Spider-Man No More issue was the one that I was immediately aware of thanks to Spider-Man being one of the main superheroes I knew about when I started my comic book journey thanks to the animated series. And seeing the iconic image of the outfit in the trash immediately jogged my memory and made me realize that you can utilize elements from the source material in order to tell a story. Not only was Spider-Man 2 the first time I consciously saw that play out, but the story it told about selfishness versus sacrifice as a result utilized the source material perfectly and resulted in some of the most iconic Spider-Man media and imagery to date. Which means that my number 1 and currently my all-time favorite Spider-Man movie is Into the Spider-Verse. And I'm gonna cash in my Stan Lee "Nuff Said" card on this one, because I feel that if I have to explain to you why Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse deserves to be in the number 1 slot, then you should probably actually watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But I digress, readers. Your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comment section below what your ranking of the 9 Spidey solo movies are from least to best. Whatever order your list is in, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can join my Patreon by clicking the card at the end of the video or in the link in the description down below, where you can also find a link to my merchandise store. Because if you were genuinely interested in hoping that I would share my opinions about the Venom movies, if we get my Patreon to $1,000 a month, I will drunk review Venom: Let There Be Carnage after drunk reviewing the first Venom years ago. Boy, that was fun. So if you want to see that, you know what to do. Or if you prefer to give a one-time donation, you can find links to my PayPal and my Ko-fi account in the description box as well. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.